Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey people, today we're going to take a look at Arcane Academy from IDW Games, and designer Eric Lang, and also designer Kevin Wilson. This game has been in mothballs for about 3 years now. It was originally called Generation Hex. Get it? Which I thought was kind of a more delightful name. Delightfully awful and cheesy, but I still enjoyed it more. But it was actually, I had it on my list of top 10 anticipated games for Gen Con 2013. But even though it was just going to be demoed there, I stopped with that. But I thought, well, surely it'll be out soon, so I won't be that, preemptive in putting it on the list. No. It's been 3 years. It's finally released from a whole different company. I can't even remember the name of the company that was originally going to put it out. They took it out of mothballs and made a brand new game out of it. They did keep the artwork. I don't know how much of the artwork they had originally completed, but they at least kept the cover art for it as well. So what this game is about is you are, and the other players are apprentice wizards. And in this universe of the game, wizardry is much more like just schoolwork, like literally like doing math problems. They use some of the terminology a bit. And you are trying to complete your assignments, which in this case are casting spells and creating magical items. And the way that the game works is actually tile placement. You're putting tiles out onto your own little player slate and then trying to activate those tiles to get magical effects and to cast the cards from your hand and possibly from the public area as well. There's a little bit more to it than that, of course. So let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played. Then we're going to come back and let you know what I think. Arcane Academy is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players. The goal of the game is to have the most prestige, that is to say points, at the end of the game. The end game is triggered when one player completes their 8th assignment, and at that point everyone including the triggering player gets one more turn. Every player gets a playmat called a player slate. They also get 3 shards and a will dial, which starts off at 3. Shards and will are used to cast your assignment cards. Speaking of those, you'll shuffle up the assignment deck, put 4 cards face up on the table, and deal 3 more out to each player to form their hand of private assignments. The rest of the deck sits in the middle of the table. You must also set up the action tiles. Place them all in the bag and shuffle it up, then place 4 out face up at random. Finally, you'll make a stock of shards, prestige tokens, and exhaustion tokens. There's also a pencils down card, which is handed to the player who triggers the endgame to remind everyone of who takes the final turn. Determine the first player and begin. On your turn, you have only 1 action to take and 2 choices for what to do with that action. You can either cast by exhausting one of your action tiles on your slate, or rest, which removes exhaustion from your slate and lets you discard and draw a new private assignment if you want to. If you choose to cast, you take an exhaustion token from the stock and place it on one of the tiles on your slate, activating it and using its magical ability. Every player's slate starts with 4 built-in magic tiles, and you can gain more to plug into the empty spaces. Every tile does something different, and many tiles let you perform multiple actions or choose between different actions. The ability pictured here simply allows you to take one of the face-up tiles from the public stock and place it on your slate. You can even use it to cover up an existing tile, including the 4 starting corner tiles. The tiles with blue and red symbols let you gain willpower and shards, respectively. While there's no limit to how many shards you can have, your will limit is 9. The ability pictured here allows you to complete 1 assignment, either from your hand or from the public display. Assignments fall into 2 categories, spells and items. Spells are cast by spending will from your dial, are one-time use, and then they just get placed underneath your slate to remind you of completed assignments. Items are cast with shards, and they stay in play and can be used every turn if you activated the right tile, or they may just have continuous passive powers or powers that activate only at the end of the game. All assignments may have drastic effects, like gaining an extra turn at the end of the game, acquiring prestige tokens, or taking resources from an opponent. If you cast a card from your hand, draw another card to replace it. This tile symbol allows you to activate one of your items that are in play and then use its power. And finally, this symbol represents chaos magic, and activating it lets you use any of the other tile abilities I just described. Perhaps the most important aspect of the game, however, is linking the action tiles together. Some tiles have small half discs along one or more sides. If one or more tiles are linked together by combining the tiles where half discs meet to form octagons, then every single unexhausted linked tile will be activated if one of them is exhausted. You must resolve the exhausted tile first, but then you may resolve the rest of the unexhausted linked tiles in any order. Only the first used tile will receive an exhaustion token, not any of the other linked tiles that you use. If you exhaust a tile that is either by itself or is not linked to the tiles that it's touching, only that tile will get activated. At the end of your turn, refill the public offer of cards and tiles if you took any of them, and then play continues to the next player. When someone completes their 8th assignment, everyone gets one more turn. At the end of the final turn, add up all the prestige tokens you've gained, the prestige on cards that you've cast, and resolve any endgame effects. Whoever has the most points is the winner. Folks, I can honestly tell you, Arcane Academy is the best game from IDW Games. Okay, that's a very low bar, as people who are familiar with my channel might know. But in all seriousness, I can tell you that Arcane Academy is a fine game. It's pretty darn good. Not great, I do have some issues with it. But honestly, it's far better than could have possibly been expected, given the fact that, like I said, it was in development hell for 3 years. But thankfully, the game that finally culminated from that, whatever stage it was originally and whatever stage it is now, it turned out to be a good game. We'll start from the beginning and go over what's it's good stuff and it's bad stuff. So first off, the components are fine. I'd say they're IDW quality. I wish that the player boards were actually sturdy cardboard rather than flimsy, just hard stock, but it's still fine. The tiles are a decent quality, and there's just cubes and the same standard gems that you get in almost every game that requires those types of gems. So I could care less about the physical components, actually. The best part about the presentation of the game is the artwork. The artwork, which I was originally enticed by in way back when I saw the original version, Generation Hex, and to now, it looks fantastic. This is a great artist. I wish I ever remembered artists' names. I'd give them credit, but look it up for yourself. They just did a fantastic job here, and it's the most endearing thing about the game, in my opinion. Not just the presentation, it's the best thing about the game. But moving on to the gameplay itself, the best part about that part of it, the gameplay-wise, is the tile placement and the tile activation. More specifically, the tile activation. It's just the most fun and addictive part of the game. Trying to get a long chain combo going on, knowing that you're rushing against the other players because you can work your hardest to try and get a long chain going, but if you're not also activating them over and over again as much as you possibly can, you're going to fall behind very quickly. And it's very fun to figure out, to puzzle it out. There's a very big puzzle aspect to this game. How do I put these tiles out in the best way possible? I don't want to make little islands of tiles because it's super inefficient. I'd rather connect as many as I possibly can together, but this piece doesn't fit the way I want it to. So now what do I do? Well, now I should cover up this other one, but then I'm losing a valuable tile. So that's an interesting part of it as well. Lots of decision making in the game, especially centered around that particular part of the game. And it's also fun when you finally have a good set of linked tiles out on your slate. How do you go about activating them? It's like, because every time you put a cube down, an exhaustion cube, you can't use it again until you rest. Resting in this game is like the thing you want to do the least. Like, no, I can go further, I can go longer, I don't want to rest. Because you just know the other players are creeping up behind you. Or they're already ahead of you, and you need every single turn that you can get. But you're going to have to do it eventually. But the best thing about the game is trying to figure out how to exhaust those tiles in just the right way. Figuring out, okay, I want to use this particular tile as many times as I possibly can. And maybe this wasn't clear in my overview, but if you have a bunch of linked tiles, only one of them gets an exhaustion cube, which means that you activate every other tile. So if there's one tile amongst that set you just want to activate over and over and over again, you can just put exhaustion cubes on every other tile but that one and keep activating it over and over again until you finally have to rest. So that's a very interesting aspect of the game, and it's the best part of the game, building that out. As far as casting the spells and the items, I found it to be a little anticlimactic. It's ultimately just like, the thing you need to do to get points after funneling, after using all of your power from your grid to get them out there. But there are some interesting ones. I like the whole aspect of, well, do I just blow my wad and cast these spells as much as possible? Or do I go for the long win of trying to do or item activation through the tile powers? That's just another valid way to win the game. But this does kind of lead me into a couple of the faults that I have with it. First and foremost, it's too long for what it is. So it's a very simple game. It's very easy to get into, very easy to learn, very easy to teach, and it should be very fast. But if you're playing with a full allotment of 4 players, I've done it with 3 and 4, it could go on a bit too long for my liking. I think the end game needed to come quicker, or I think there needs to be more incentive for players to be casting assignments as quickly as they possibly can, because as it is, there can be a tendency for players to just sort of take their time and build up their stuff. And I think maybe I would have liked a little more urgency in the game to no, cast your spells, get them out there as quickly as possible to make the end of the game come quicker, because I think it overstays its welcome just a little bit too much. But on top of that, I do think there is a bit of a snowball effect here. Now, I don't want to harp on this too much because, like I said, it is a very simple and light game, and therefore in a game like this type of thing is more forgivable. But it is definitely the case that when one player gets a couple of... There are tiles that are definitely better than the others, like the chaos tiles, the tiles that give you card or assignment casting, which can be super critical. If you are denied assignment casting and you're stuck with just the one you started the game with, you're in a lot of trouble. So the player that can get a hold of these types of tiles more often, and can also get tiles that link perfectly with the tiles they already have, if 1 or 2 players can do that but the other players can't because of that can give them a serious advantage, and it just gets progressively worse from there, because the more tiles you have that are really good and more powerful, the bigger string that you make, the more actions you're taking every single round, and more resources you're getting every single round, and more assignments you're casting that give you special abilities, some of which might reduce the cost for you. So these things compound, they snowball, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, to where you will get, and in some cases, you can have an insurmountable lead at a certain point, because things just worked out that way for you, and not for the other players. Now again, because of the lightness of the game, it's not like this overbearing thing like, oh, I put in so much work just to have it foiled by randomness. I think that, especially if you're playing with everyone who has played the game before and everyone knows, I need to get that tile, that goes away a little bit, but it still comes down to a bit of randomness. What is the tile you really need going to be out there on your turn when it comes back around? It's almost agonizing to look at the board state, so to speak, the cards and the allotment of cards and tiles, knowing that they may not be there when it comes back around. Not even the cards so much, definitely the tiles. So that can be a bit frustrating, and because the game goes on a little bit longer than I think it should, it could be a bit exacerbated. So I think that is mainly what keeps this from being a great game for me, because ultimately, especially with some of the light take-that elements to the game, it feels a little bit too take-that-ish and a little bit too light in some aspects, while the best part of the game is the deepest part of the game, which is the tile activation. So it's a good game. I was just definitely surprised that it was as good as it was. Who knows? Maybe if it had gotten released at the time, it would have been terrible 3 years ago. Who knows? So it could be a good thing that it took this long. But in any case, I think people who like lighter games and who don't care investing a decent amount of time in a light game will like this even more than I did. I think it's just fine and a pretty decent game. That is Arcane Academy from IDW Games.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.